Hey there, Vegas Nation. I'm your host, Cassie Soto. Welcome inside of the Las Vegas Review-Journal studio. Well, if you've noticed, the Raiders front office has been extremely busy since the NFL free agency period opened up on March 13th. But if you haven't been keeping track of all of the transitions, don't worry, we've got you covered. Joining us now to help us break it all down is Raiders beat writer for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Michael Gehlken. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. How you doing, Cassie?
I'm great, thank you. Probably not as busy as you, Michael, so let's go ahead and get this thing going. We'll start with the acquisitions. I know you and I talked when Antonio Brown was traded to the Raiders, and it'll probably be the biggest move they make all year. How has his addition already made an impact on the team?
I think you've already seen John Gruden be imaginative, devising ways he can use Antonio Brown in his offense. Antonio Brown was introduced at a news conference on March 13th, hours before he even signed a contract. John Gruden and Antonio Brown were in Gruden's office going over 400 cut-ups that Gruden had made of Antonio Brown's film, talking about plays that he liked, plays that he didn't like, where he saw need for improvement, different ways that the Steelers used Antonio Brown, how John Gruden looks to use him in those ways or other ways. And so Antonio Brown will be a part of this Raiders offense has already begun.
Well, piggybacking off of that, who are some other key players the Raiders have signed in this free agency period?
Well, there's a few of them. Certainly to stay on the offensive side of the ball, Tyrell Williams at wide receiver, bringing both those two players in was a big deal for the Raiders. Tyrell Williams was the #1 target for the team at wide receiver in free agency after it got its top trade target in Antonio Brown. It didn't expect necessarily to be competitive for Tyrell Williams, but he seemed Tyrell had a deal seemingly in place one night. Raiders circled back around with him the next morning, found out that Tyrell Williams could be had, and were able to negotiate a contract over the ensuing hours. LaMarcus Joyner, a former safety for the LA Rams, also a versatile defensive back, able to play nickel corner. He's going to see time at both positions for this team. And also to wrap up the big moves, look at left tackle or right tackle Trent Brown, formerly of the New England Patriots. Raiders made him the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history with a 4-year, $66 million contract, essentially a 2-year deal. Raiders did a really good job, despite all the money that they invested in free agency and even in trade acquisition, Antonio Brown, protecting themselves against the salary cap.
All right, well, those guys are newly signed. How about the guys that were re-signed? Who will we see come back for at least another season?
Jonathan Hankins, a nose tackle who the Raiders signed before week 2 of last season. He's back into the fold with a 2-year contract. Wide receiver Dwayne Harris, a return man who, although he certainly provides a spark in the return game, showing a real heads-up aspect to his game, knowing when it's okay to scoop up a punt and able to return it for a 9-yard touchdown on Christmas Eve, as he did against the Denver Broncos and what was thought to be actually the final game in Oakland Raiders history. Instead, he goes ahead and scoops that and takes it for a score. Other examples of that as well. Also was second in the NFL in special teams tackles last year with 15 of them. So another wide receiver that the Raiders have. Not going to be a big part of this offense, but the team knows what they're getting from a special teams standpoint.
Great, and unfortunately, how about the guys that we won't be seeing return for another season? Who have the Raiders parted ways with?
Well, in order to pull off the Tyrell Williams move and the $11 million that Tyrell Williams is earning for 2019, Raiders needed to clear some cash. The team released A.J. McCarron, and it also released wide receiver Jordy Nelson. So Raiders were hoping to have McCarron back as their backup quarterback. Because of some guarantees on his deal, they weren't able to commit to that, and the cash that accompanied that. Likewise, with Jordy Nelson, he had a $3 million base salary that was scheduled to come fully guaranteed. So our Raiders made those moves, hoping, not closing the door that either player could return down the road at a lesser cost. But right now, that does not appear to be in the cards.
All right, Michael, well, out of everything that you've seen happen, what move has surprised you the most?
Surprising move. I don't know if one screams surprise just yet. Really, the Raiders have so much of needs across their roster. If they would have acquired Le'Veon Bell, I think that would have been a surprise just because everything I'd heard suggested that the Raiders weren't going to really invest there. They did listen to see whether or not his market was going to come down to a level where they felt they might be a fit. But certainly, obviously, Le'Veon Bell going to the New York Jets, Raiders soon thereafter committing to Tyrell Williams. Both those moves couldn't have happened. It had to be one or the other if either were to occur in the first place. So both of those guys weren't coming here. Maybe once, I don't say surprise, but I think it's worth talking about briefly to circle back around to Antonio Brown. In terms of impact on this team, Derek Carr and Antonio Brown have been throwing the football multiple occasions since that trade became official, even actually before it became official. Again, out of East Bay High School, running routes, just being out there. I think it could change the culture at the position, just having somebody with the work ethic that Antonio Brown carries onto this roster. He has credibility as being considered one of the very best NFL wide receivers, perhaps in history, if he continues at his current torrid statistical rate.
Yeah, that bromance will be alive and well come the 2019-2020 season. Michael, as always, thank you for keeping us updated, and I'm sure we'll have a few more things to talk about before you head out to Nashville for the NFL Draft in a little over a month now.
That's right. Thanks for having me.
Well, once again, that was Raiders beat writer for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Michael Gehlken. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at GehlkenNFL for all things Raiders. For Michael Gehlken, I'm Cassie Soto. Thank you for watching Vegas Nation.